You're Human and You. Written by Mad Max the Black. Chapter 17. The Greatest is Here. Part 1. Twilight ran her eyes slowly down over the wall of text before her, trying to discern if any of it could be any help to her. Finding nothing that could even be remotely considered helpful, she closed the large tome with a snap and placed it on top of the ever-growing pile of rejects. When that was done, she leaned back in her chair and rubbed at her eyes with a hoof, groaning softly. She had already looked through everything in the library that was relevant to magical transportation, and so far she had come up with next to nothing. With no other resources left at Ponyville's library, the only place that would have anything related to what she needed would be the Canterlot Archives.
And I really don't want to go to Canterlot.
She whined, her eyes still closed. Without looking, she pushed a small amount of magic through her horn. Years of training helped her focus. With practice ease, she lifted a nearby glass of water and took a sip of the cool liquid. Sighing happily as the refreshing drink soothed her parched throat, she placed the glass back on the coffee table where she had gotten from, before leaning forward and grabbing the next book in her hooves. Pulling it forward, she flipped the cover open and began to read.
It was in my darkest dreams that he did appear, almost like a shining knight in armor. I was lost, alone and afraid, and even now I do not know why the mere sight of him was enough to calm my fragile nerves. It all started several months ago this last Tuesday, during the autumn festival of the harvest moon. I was but a young mare, just out of our adolescence, and had no idea what horrors would doth hold. Although I had known all the troubles that would be caused on that fateful day, I would not have ventured forth from my home. My troubles began shortly after I spied Summer Blossom and Appleseed hiding behind one of the tents of the fair. They appeared to me...
Blinking, Twilight frowned as she continued to read. After another page of nonsense, she started flipping through the pages, confused.
What the fuck is this?
She muttered, skimming the latter pages quickly.
White Harold leaned in close, breathing softly in my ear as he...
Confused and slightly flustered, Twilight closed the book and glanced at the cover. Upon seeing the title, her eye twitched and she groaned.
Love Lost Among Worlds by Covered Love?
She growled, slamming her head on the desk.
This won't help me at all.
Keeping her forehead pressed into the wood, Twilight lit up her horn and, in a flash of magic, she levitated the book across the room and, gently, placed it back in its proper place in the romance section. Lifting her head up, she pulled the next book over and glanced at the cover as well. Upon seeing the words, 2 Worlds, 1 Heart by Timid Pleasure, in loopy pink writing, her horn flashed again and it joined its friend back on the shelf.
I don't even know why we have those here,
she grumbled, pulling herself out of her chair and stretching. She winced to the joints of her back and wings popped loudly.
I will never understand why Max likes doing that,
she mused, flexing her flight muscles. Turning back to the desk, she cast a critical eye over the mountain of books before sighing.
Right. Let's get you all back where you belong,
she murmured as she began to push magic down her horn. Picking up books in her magic, she proceeded to trot around the library, sliding books back onto the shelves whenever she passed their proper place. As she worked, she hummed softly to herself. Nothing much. Just an old song that her mother used to sing when her and her brother, whenever they were sick.
Oh, tell me a tale of mystery, of a poet old and grey, and the magic book that brought to life the tales the poet lay. His muse, she was his happiness, which let his daydreams roam. He wrote stories of her beauty deep in the pages of his tome. To the darkness of one dawn, still in slumber's hold, the muse she held up the book, consumed by the rhymes it told. And now to free his love from her plight, he needs the sun-forged key, to find the spirit of dark within the light, to awaken harmony.
Placing another book on the shelf, Twilight was lost in her own thoughts when the front door suddenly burst open. The noise startled her, causing her to lose control over her magic. Books that had previously been suspended in midair fell to the floor with resounding thuds. Letting out a shriek, Twilight's wings flared wide and she spun around. Sunny breezed in the doorway, her eyes wide and breathing heavily.
Oh, it's you,
Twilight said, placing a hoof over her chest. Her heart felt like she was trying to break out and her ribs were trying to run away.
Don't scare me like that.
She scolded the disheveled Pegasus, shooting her a dark look before picking up the books again. Holding them gingerly in her magic, she checked to make sure that none of them had been damaged in the fall. Oblivious to Twilight's hostility, Sunny danced in place while the whites of her eyes were showing.
Twilight, have you seen Max? Did he come back here? I can't find him anywhere.
She asked, clear panic in her voice. Twilight gave her an unamused look.
I believe he was with you.
She said as she returned to reshelving the books.
In fact, last I checked, both of you left this house together, looking rather happy.
She added under her breath. She placed another book in its place before moving to another section. Then he flew over and hovered next to her, wringing her hose in agitation.
We were together, yes. But when we went to Sugar Cube Corner for lunch, he didn't want to go inside for whatever reason. So I left him outside while I went to go get something to eat.
I growled slightly at that. She knew the reason Max didn't want to go in, and quite frankly, it was through sheer force of will that she didn't chew Mrs. Cake out for what she attempted to do.
He is not some sex toy for her to use.
He fumed silently. In her anger, she slammed a book into the bookshelf a little too forcefully. She winced as she heard the cover crack slightly.
Anyways,
Sunny continued, still oblivious to Twilight's currently emotional state. She flew in front of her, blocking the eloquent's path with a wing.
When I came back out, he wasn't anywhere to be seen. I flew around town looking for him, but I couldn't find him. I don't see what the problem is. He's fully capable of making his own decisions.
Twilight said haughtily, pushing past Sunny and moving across the library to another section.
If he wants to wander around town by himself for a while, far be it from me to stop him. He's an intelligent creature, after all. You're not at all worried?
Sunny asked in disbelief.
Not in the slightest.
Twilight scoffed, not bothering to turn around. She refused to look at Sunny.
This is all her fault anyways.
She thought, trying to control her anger. Everything had been fine until she showed up. Life had been relatively peaceful lately. It had been a good couple of months. Max and her had just been happy, just living day to day. He was content to just be with her and live with her in the library. And it had been wonderful. Ever since Max had showed up, Twilight had had some pony to talk to. Some pony that would listen to what she had to say without becoming bored. Some pony who, when they asked her a question, didn't interrupt her explanation because they wanted the quick, dumbed-down version. Max actually listened intently to what she had to say. He cared about her opinion, and Twilight was more than happy to give it to him. Everything had been just perfect until Sunny showed up. Max had been happy living with her, and then Sunny found him again, just waltzing right back into his life like nothing had happened. She hadn't kept him in a cage for 2 weeks with very little food. And then she had started asking questions, and Max had found out there was a way to get back to his own world. Now, here she was, trying to figure out how to get rid of the one and only individuals in her life that had actually made her feel whole. Put it lightly, Twilight was not happy. She sighed, closing her eyes. She knew she shouldn't feel the way she did. She should feel happy that there was a way for Max to get back home again, and she should feel elated that he would return to his own world. He probably had friends and family that missed him, or were sick not knowing where he was. She should feel great, knowing that she was the one that was going to make his return possible. Then why did she feel so depressed?
Seriously, how can you not be worried?
Sunny asked, her voice snapping Twilight out of her thoughts.
He could be in trouble, lost, hurt. I highly doubt he's in any kind of trouble.
Twilight said, rolling her eyes, pulling a small ladder over with her magic. They climbed up several rungs before glancing through the row of books, looking for the proper place to put one of the books floating around her.
We're in Ponyville, not Camelot. I seriously doubt anything bad is going to happen to him. Ah!
Severe, blinding pain exploded through Twilight's head, causing her to cry out in shock. It felt like somebody was shoving a railroad spike through her skull into her brain. Slipping off the ladder, she dropped to the ground, clutching at her horn. Sparks kept leaping from it as she bit her bottom lip, blinking back tears. The books fell to the floor around her, no longer supported by her sputtering magic. She writhed around, whimpered pitifully as another burst of pain flared within her head. And just as quickly as it started, the pain ceased. Twilight was on her hose in an instant, looking around the library, completely alert. Her ears were perked and her wings were fluttered widely. Sunny just stared at her, mouth agape.
What was that? That?
Twilight growled, her eyes narrowing.
Was a spell I placed on Max's collar the first week I had him. It was designed to let me know if he ever gotten off. I had completely forgotten about it. Wait, you designed a spell to horribly shock you?
Denise asked, looking at Twilight like she thought she was insane. Twilight shook her head.
No, I designed it to give me a light zap if the collar was ever removed.
Ignoring Sunny's look, she began to search around for her saddlebags. As she did so, she brought up a mental checklist and began to run through it quickly.
Bike's currently at Rarity's, helping her with her orders, so I don't have to worry about him. Library's closed, so no pony's gonna come in. A large shock can only mean one thing.
She continued.
A unicorn has forcibly removed the collar with magic, causing the spell to overload. I highly doubt Max would reveal himself to another pony just to get the collar off. So that can only mean one thing. And that is?
Then he asked, hovering beside her. Finding her bags, Twilight lifted them onto her back and clipped them into place. She quickly tightened the straps before flapping her wings once and folding them to her sides. Hurrying to the door, she shot a glance back to her shoulder at Sunny.
That means,
she said, forcing the library's door open with a burst of magic,
that you are right, and Max is in serious trouble.
Sunny's eyes widened as she let out a small whimpering squeak. Turning back around, Twilight exited the library. The sun was just beginning to set, casting a fiery orange glow across the entire town. All around town, ponies were heading back home, happily chatting with one another as the day came to a close. Foals rested on their parents' back, tired after playing outside all day in the warm weather. Every pony seemed happy and oblivious.
And somewhere out there, Max is in trouble.
Twilight growled, her eyes darting around the scene before her.
What's the plan?
Sunny asked, moving to stand beside her. Her tone was serious, her usual carefree nature absent. Twilight glanced sideways at her, her previous discontent for the mare forgotten.
First, we need to get hold of the guard,
she said, turning quickly, heading towards the center of town. With the flap of her wings, Sunny followed behind her.
Are you sure they'll help us?
She asked.
They should,
Twilight replied, keeping her gaze forward.
They are technically my royal guards after all.
Max. Where the hell did he get a shiv? I thought as I stumbled backwards, clutching at my arm. Above me, the crowd roared with delight as I fought back tears of pain. Scrambling, I dodged to the side as my opponent lunged at me, waving his weapon about wildly. I tried to put as much distance as I could between us, rushing to the other end of the pit. Once I was at a safe distance, I glanced down at my arm. I winced in pain and alarm when I saw blood slowly oozing through my fingers. The cut wasn't deep, but it was bleeding a lot. The crowd of ponies roared again, and I glanced up just in time to dodge another lunge from the shiv-wielding human. Damn it! He's too fast! Grunting, I swung my good arm around and punched him in the chest. The air left his lungs with a whoosh, and he stumbled backwards, clutching at his chest. Glaring at me, he shrieked loudly and came at me again. My eyes widened as I just barely managed to duck under his strike. Looking around, I desperately searched for an escape route. The edges of the pit were easily 12 feet in height, and with nothing in the pit that could be used as leverage, there was no way I was getting out of the hole without outside help. While I was looking for an exit, my opponent took another swing at me. Being momentarily distracted, I failed to move out of the way in time, and caught his fist with the side of my head. Stars exploded in front of my eyes as I staggered backwards, falling to the ground. As I lay there, trying to get my head to stop ringing, my opponent leapt on top of me, thrusting his shiv towards my stomach. With a yelp, I brought my hands up and shoved the blade away at last second. However, I wasn't fast enough to avoid the injury completely. I gasped in shock as I felt the blade slice through my side, immediately drawing blood. Come on, boy! That is it! Carve him a new one! A voice cried out, barely discernible in the noise of the crowd. Quickly glancing up, I felt my anger grow as I identified the speaker. Golden Ingot leaned over the edge of the pit, sneering down at us. He happily puffed away on a fat cigar as he watched the spectacle below. Great. All of my favorite ponies are together under one roof. Snarling, I brought up my knees and slammed them into the back of the human on top of me. He cried out as I forced him off, and as he rolled away, the shiv dug into my shoulder. I yelped in pain but still managed to push myself to my feet. Ignoring the throbbing shoulder inside, I turned to face my opponent, readying myself for another attack. Instead, I saw him struggling to get to his feet. Seeing him distracted, I ran forward and jumped, slamming both my feet into his chest with as much force as I could muster. I was rewarded with a loud crack as several of his ribs gave out. He fell back, clutching at his chest and wheezing in pain. As the sound echoed around the pit, the ponies above cheered and stamped their hooves, reveling in his suffering. Unable to return to my feet to the ground fast enough, I landed heavily on my back. Blinking back tears as pain flared in my shoulder, I rolled over with a groan. That works so much better in the movies. Getting to my feet, I glanced down at my opponent. He was still on the ground, coughing up blood as he collided his bruised chest. I swallowed hard, trying to ignore a taste of bile rising in my throat. I wasn't a fighter by any means. The worst fight I had ever been before coming to Equestria had been a small scuffle with another boy back in 2nd grade. The worst injury received had been a scraped knee. My nearly daily wrestling matches with Dash, while helpful, didn't really count either. And neither of us were truly out for blood. However, I was now being forced to fight for my life. I had to kill this human before he killed me. And I wasn't 100% sure if I could actually do it. Still coughing, my opponent finally managed to get back to his feet, gripping that goddamn shiv tighter in his hand. "Atta boy! Earn me some bits!" Golden Egan cheered. I ground my teeth together, wishing that bastard would lean too far over and fall into the pit himself. I could use him as a club. Cracking my neck, I hunched down and waited for the incoming attack. I didn't have to wait long. With a scream, my opponent rushed me, the shiv held high. Clenching my teeth in preparation for the incoming pain, I reached up and grabbed the jagged blade in my left hand. Blood immediately dripped from my clenched fist as the jagged blade sliced into my hand, but I managed to hold on despite the pain. Bringing up my other arm, I slammed my fist into his stomach once, twice, 3 times before releasing the blade and backing off. A roar sounded from the crowd, signaling their approval. As the human stood bent over, choking on blood while attempting to gasp for air, I took time to look at my hand. A deep gash ran across the palm, and an alarming amount of blood was flowing from it. I clenched my fingers, wincing as the torn flesh flared with pain. Okay, so that wasn't my brightest idea ever. Something flashed in the corner of my vision, and I tore my gaze away from my hand to look. Lying on the ground between us, covered in my blood, was the shiv. The human must have dropped it shortly after I had released it. Not waiting for my opponent to recover, I dashed forward and scooped the weapon up. In a split-second decision, I knew what I had to do in order to ensure my own survival. Holding the shiv in my right uninjured hand, I tackled the human to the ground. We struggled for several seconds before I managed to get around behind him. Wrapping my arm around his neck, I tightened my grip as he fought to get free. Struggling frantically, the human grabbed at my arms with both of his hands, scratching me as he pulled on my limb with all of his strength. When he finally pulled my arm far enough away from his neck, he opened his mouth and bit down. I screamed as I felt his teeth sink into my flesh, cutting through the skin and muscle before reaching the bone. Like my tears, I growled. "That does it!" With a grunt, I pushed my arm he was biting up and forcing his head up and exposing his throat. Spinning the shiv around in my hand, I raised it high into the air. The human's eyes widened, and he began to thrash with renewed vigor. Although it might just be a measly shiv, I thought as blood dripped on my arm, it is quite effective when applied to the jugular. Bringing the blade down, I plunged it into the struggling man's neck. Instantly, a torrent of blood erupted from the room, his fighting only causing the gash to open wider. He thrashed, panic clear in his eyes. Fighting back tears, I just closed my eyes and dug the shiv in deeper, wishing for it to end soon. I tried to ignore the feeling of flesh tearing, as well as the wet slick of the blade sinking deeper and deeper into his neck. Soon enough, his struggle slowly began to weaken. His jaws began to slacken, and I wrenched my arm from his mouth before pushing him off of me and scrambling away, breathing heavily. He just laid there, clutching weakly at his throat. A low gurgling noise came from his mouth as the life slowly left his body. While he died, I just sat there, staring at my hand. My entire arm was now soaked in a mixture of my blood and his, although I suspected that most of it was his. I felt numb all over and had to fight the urge to vomit. I had just killed someone. I had actually just killed someone. Sure, it had been in self-defense, for the twisted amusement of a gang of sick, demented ponies, but still, I had killed another human being. At least, it's over. I thought, trying to calm my nerves. My entire body was shaking due to all the adrenaline coursing through my system. My senses were on high alert, and I was dimly aware of the golden ingot was looking down at me in disgust, chewing angrily at the end of his cigar, which had gone out. I didn't care, though. I was just happy it was all finally over. There you have it, mares and stallions. A rather spectacular display, wouldn't you say? Mr. Red roared, his magically amplified voice cutting through the noise. All around him, the rim of the pit ponies cheered and stomped. Some were grumbling about losing a few bits to a bet. Sour looks in their faces, but most were just happy to have seen blood. I dry heaved at the sight, never having seen such pure, unadulterated joy in someone else's suffering. And it's not over yet, Mr. Red cried, a wicked grin on his muzzle. Oh no, we're just getting started. Let's bring out the next competitor. At his words, my heart sunk into my stomach. No. As I levitated the lifeless body out of the pit, another cage was placed among the lips. Ponies began stomping their hooves, and one at a time, chanting, "Fight! Fight! Fight! Fight!" With a clink, the cage door swung open. I stepped forward, the human inside spilling out onto the pit. As my new opponent, fresh and rested, staggered onto their feet, I closed my eyes, tears beginning to roll down my face. My injuries from the previous fight took that moment to flare to life, causing me to groan in pain. Please, is anybody out there? Twilight, where are you? While that dumb dog dies in the arena, I have been morally obligated to say out this list of Patreons to this wonderful organization. Thank you to Tier 1's Balance Kindness, Chase Lemaster, Dreamless, Portal, Hyperlink, Jason, HK4, AK Texture, Lord High, Nightingale, Macario, Pony Entertainment, Starlight Blaze, Rain Flicker, and Tyler Perry. The Tier 2s, Captain Blueshadow, Chaotic Mist, The Animated Ghost, DJMX 2000, Elemental Wolf, H1 Wolf King, Potato 20, Mr. Crazy Deacon, Solar Comet, 212 Trooper, Mackenzie, McCullers, Nocturne, Papa Lennon, Redeemer of Dark, Solus Eclipse, Sword Brother, and Mordred, Hardy Bryant, Rihanna Dragonwolf, Steel Spark. And of course, a big thank you to the Tier 3s, Titan Tiers, Dark Guardian, Danish Dash, Maverick, and User 1842. A large thank you to the current ones, Biss Eclipse and Silent Titan. All these guys sound like fucking nerds. That aside, however, thank you guys so much for your patronage. This has been Mr. Red. Have a wonderful day, and don't miss the next show.